Greetings, Cleveland, and welcome to Creative Focus, the show that illuminates some of Cleveland's most talented and creative artists across the genres of dance, film, music, theater, and visual arts. I'm your host, Cornell Calhoun III, and I am thrilled to be at the Cleveland Museum of Art for Martin Puryear's Nexus, the exhibition that allows us to walk where form speaks, silence is meaningful, and hands have shaped history. And my guest today is the curator and visionary of this extraordinary exhibition, Miss Emily Liebert. Emily, welcome to Creative Focus.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
It's my pleasure. First question.
Yeah.
When audiences walk into Nexus, what do you hope they'll feel before they begin to understand?
I hope that they will feel the creativity and imagination and curiosity that has motivated Martin Puryear for his career of approximately 6 decades.
6 decades.
Yeah.
You worked with him closely on the exhibition.
Yes.
Did he reveal anything to you about his work that's not visible on the surface?
Well, yes, as you said, we've been working on this for a long time, for about 4 years. So over the last 4 years, I've had many conversations with Martin, and he doesn't give away too many secrets. There is some mystery in how the works are made, but he's incredibly generous about sharing about his process of making and explaining why he's chosen the materials that he chooses. And we've tried to incorporate a lot of that into the labels and the texts in the exhibition, because I think I've had the privilege of having these conversations for 4 years, and I want to share that with our audience members. So I encourage audience members to read the labels and to learn about how he, for example, made his own rawhide, how he bought skins from a butcher, turned them into rawhide, and was fascinated by the transformation of this living material to a sculptural material. So we include information like that throughout the show, or how he used again and again the process of cold molding, which is a technique used to make the hulls of ships, and how he adapted that for his own sculptural visual vocabulary. This is a work called Alien Huddle, and some of our audience members may recognize it. This is in the Cleveland Museum of Art's collection. It was a gift of Agnes Gunn, the late Agnes Gunn.
Wow.
And as you can see, it's made of 3 interlocking orbs. It's hollow on the inside, and it's made through a process called cold molding that I mentioned before, where strips of wood are just attached one to the other around this form. And you can see the process. You can see the process of making. That's not concealed. You can see that these staples are put in to hold the wood together, and then they're removed. So there's still that history of making that's embedded in the work. There's a sort of, I think, a kind of almost and there's an organic quality to the form. There's a geometric quality, and just look as you move around it. The sculpture becomes completely different. This view is you just see sort of one sphere. As you continue to move, the form reveals itself.
Wow.
And that, I read that, this idea that an object looks different from wherever you're looking at. I sort of read that as a metaphor for the idea that, whatever your perspective, whatever your experience, you'll see things differently. There's so many ways to see the same object. And that sense of, you were asking about the mystery of the work, that sense of surprise as you move around the work, where things are revealed one after another. That's something that we also, that's in a lot of the works, and that's something that we tried to reflect also in the structure of the show, that you'll move through the show and something just presents itself, something appears.
What would you say is the most exciting aspect of curating this exhibition?
Getting to know this body of work as intimately as I have over the last 4 years. There's, you would think after such a long period working on an exhibition, I would think, okay, I get it, all my questions are answered, but in fact, I keep making discoveries, you know. Years into this process, walking through the show now, I still see things, I still notice things, I still continue to learn things from the artist, and I think that that is really something about this body of work. It just continues to give and reveal and make new meanings. So I hope our audiences in Cleveland will come to the show and maybe come back again and again. It's on view until August 9th.
August 9th. And when does it open?
April 12th.
April 12th to August 9th.
April 12th to August 9th, yes. So this is a maquette, it's a model for a large outdoor sculpture that Martin Puryear made that opened in 2016 called Big Bling. And I'll show you over here, we have a photograph of what the work looks like in real space. It's one of the largest works, he's one of the largest outdoor works he's ever made. It was 40 feet tall. Martin Puryear's been working in public space since 1977. It's been a sort of a constant interest, constant practice of his. So this was an amazing work. It was, here we can see a little bit in the model. And you see
this is New York, right?
In New York. Right. It was commissioned by the Madison Square Park Conservancy in New York City, in Madison Square Park. It was not intended to travel originally, but people loved it so much that it's kind of been on this tour. It went to Philadelphia next, and now it resides in North Adams, Massachusetts at Mass MoCA. So it's this 40-foot structure, tall structure, and it's a form, it's sort of organic. I think it's animal-like. You see it again and again throughout. You see iterations of this form.
That's the first thing I thought about was the animal.
Yeah. You see this form again and again throughout.
The exhibition spans from the 1960s until today.
Yeah.
Was there a challenge in making sure that people can identify with it, you know, to make the older works alive as opposed to just old and ancient?
That's an interesting question, and I think it's an especially, I can answer this question in a way that is very particular to Martin Puryear. The earliest work in the show is from 1962. It's a print, a woodblock print called Bull. And so this was made, of course, a long time ago. What I think is so fascinating about this print, and many of some of the earliest works are from the 1960s, but you see in these works, even though he became a sculptor, an artist working primarily in 3 dimensions, you see so much of what would go on to animate his practice. So I think if you look at this print from 1962, you'll notice, oh, it's an image of a bull, but it's quite abstract. And you'll see, oh, he's really showing the wood grain of the block that he made the print with, while he went on to be a sculptor who uses primarily wood. So I think throughout Martin Puryear's particular practice, there are so many connections to be drawn from 1962 to the most recent work, 2023. And I think you can kind of move back and forward. And we tried to arrange the show in a way that would really highlight those links. So you'd be looking at, as Martin himself says, almost a spiral where themes, forms, ideas return again and again, slightly different. There's a work in this show called On the Tundra. It's a sculpture, sort of an abstract falcon perching on the rock. It's made in cast iron. It's a dark patina. And the reason that Martin Puryear came to the form of the falcon is that he's very interested in gyrfalcons. It's a species of bird whose feathers range, same species, range from black to white depending on their particular habitat in the Arctic. So he always wanted to make a white version of that same sculpture. He made the first one in 1986. He didn't make the second Falcon until 2022, when he came upon a material and a process that seemed right to make that work. So ideas really stay in his head. Even if he's not working on it with his hands, ideas stay in his head and may take many, many more years to materialize.
And materials are really important to him.
Absolutely.
Right. How does, because I know silence was a big aspect of his work. How does silence, when you look at a sculptor, how do you read the silence in that sculpture from his work, would you say?
Well, I think his work really invites a quiet contemplation. For example, we made a choice. There are 2 documentaries. They're part of this exhibition, but they're in a different part of the museum because we didn't want there to be sound while you were looking at the sculpture. I think there's so much to take in with these sculptures that they benefit from just a sort of a quiet, deep looking and bringing the kind of focused concentration that the artist himself brings to making each work.
And some of the works haven't been shown in decades, is that correct?
That's right.
So is there a challenge, Emily, in reintroducing works in an exhibition or no?
Well, I think that the works that we brought in that haven't been shown in a long time, works like Noblesse O, Night and Day, we made a choice to include them because they made so much sense with works that are better known. So they just sort of expanded a story and gave it new facets.
Are there any works that fascinate you more than others?
One theme that really interests me in Martin's work is the theme of the natural world. And the natural world is everywhere in his practice, from his choice of wood, which, as he says, used to be, it used to be alive. It was a living organism as opposed to, say, a metal or marble. So the foundational material of his practice is close to the natural world. But visitors will also see birds throughout this show. And Martin has long been fascinated by falcons for a number of reasons. But falconry, birds, the natural world, the mobility and freedom of flight are some of the themes that people will see. So one of the things that I love looking at is the bird sculptures that we didn't put in one area of the exhibition. They're sort of dispersed throughout the show so that visitors will encounter them just as they sort of moved in and out of Martin's work. This is called CFAO, and this is a work, you'll notice the structure. It's a wheelbarrow that Martin found in France when he was doing a residency at the Alexander Calder Foundation in 1993. He sent it back to his studio in upstate New York, and then he created this sculpture quite a few years later in 2006. And it combines a number of elements. So you have the wheelbarrow, you have the wheels, wagons. Themes of mobility and migration, as I mentioned before, have been an ongoing interest for Martin. So you see that in the wheelbarrow. And then sitting on top of it, he was inspired by this stack of wood and just the sort of visual poetry of that. So you have that resting on the wheelbarrow. And then carved here is a particular fang mask. He was a volunteer for the Peace Corps in Sierra Leone in the early 1960s, has long been an admirer of African art and artisanal crafts. And this was a particular fang mask that he admired greatly. And so he carved its form into wood and placed that here.
What was the biggest challenge for you in curating this exhibition?
Well, I would say 2 things. I'll give you a conceptual and a practical answer.
I'll take them.
Okay, conceptual, narrowing down from a selection. We started with a selection, I think, of about 180 works, and getting that down to 40. Wow. Making those choices. That's been, that's been one of the, not that it was an obstacle that we had to overcome, but that was, a really important process of making this show, just shaving down the checklist, and letting some works go that I love. But the choice we had to make was Martin's work sings when it has space around it. So it's very important with this particular body of work that it not feel overcrowded. So we really had to make choices, let some works go that are terrific works, but too many works in a room sort of starts to cancel the magic. So that was a challenge. And then practically, as visitors will see, these are very big works of art. So I would say one challenge was just, and my colleagues in collections management really bore the brunt of this, getting the works in the door, getting them on the wall, getting them, so there's so much orchestration in just moving objects to create an exhibition, and a show of large-scale sculpture is especially demanding in that capacity.
So when working as a curator, you're working with the artist. Is it a difficult process when the artist really wants a piece of work in the exhibition and the curator saying, well, it may not fit? Does that happen a lot? Or?
I mean, it's always a back and forth between an artist and a curator, for sure. And we each have our perspectives. I think one of the really exciting things about this show, one of the privileges for me of working on it, was getting to work so closely with the artist. So when people walk through this show, they're going to be looking not only at a curator's perspective on 60 years of work, they're going to be looking at the artist's perspective on 60 years of his own work, going back from the present to the 1960s. And I think that's a really a special narrative to offer, that this show is so infused with Martin Puryear himself.
What do you hope Cleveland audiences will take home from this exhibition?
I really hope we get a lot of Cleveland audiences in this show to explore and take away what it means to be, first, to be a maker. This is a show for makers. This is an artist who is so dedicated to and passionate about his materials. He is an artist who has his hands on every work of art that leaves his studio. He has been intimately involved with that work with his hands. So I hope people take away the rich potential for making, and I hope people see how meaningfully art can relate to the world that we inhabit.
Well spoken. Emily, thank you so much for being on this show. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure for me too.
Martin Puryear's Nexus at the Cleveland Museum of Art reminds us that art doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It tells us to slow down, reflect, and truly see. I'm Cornell Calhoun III. For TV 20, we are Cleveland and Creative Focus. Until the next time becomes our time, be well, be safe.